Good morning. You beat me to the punch, some of you. That was awesome. Do that always. That's my favorite. That was awesome. Good to be here with you guys. I love that. And thank you. I think that last song, Nikki was singing that, and I just stood in the back listening to you all sing and singing with you, and I felt like, man, you guys ministered to me this morning. It was powerful. It's good to be here with you. We're in the middle of this series called Difference Maker, and we're going to be here in week 2 as of today. We paused last week for child dedication service, and today I'm going to kick us off by sharing an embarrassing story. So, several years ago, I had a lot going on. That's the way that I'll phrase this. And I did. I was finishing out a degree. I was finishing out a master's in counseling. I was also working at a public behavioral health clinic here in town part-time, and I was working full-time here at the church. And so I was writing papers. I was trying to figure stuff out. I was also here doing things. And you ever have those moments where you're in a season of life where there's like more things that you need to do than there are hours in the day, and that stresses you out? It's kind of like that. And so what would happen is I'd find myself staying up late, writing papers, reading things, responding to emails, doing whatever I needed to do so that I could go to bed. And I kept having this thought. I'm like, if I don't sleep, I'm not gonna have the energy I need for tomorrow, which is never a really great thought process. And for the first time in my life, I developed insomnia. Never had experienced this before. And so I finally went, and this got so bad, I hadn't slept for like days. And I went to a doctor and they gave me sleep medication for the very first time. And I'm really sensitive to medications. And so I remember the very first time I went to take this, I hadn't slept. It'd been like 3 days. And I'm like, okay, I just need to sleep tonight. My family, I didn't have to wake up early the next day. My family was actually leaving early in the morning, so I could just sleep in. There was like nothing I needed to do. And at 11 p.m., I took this medication and it knocked me out. And I slept, and I was hoping I'd just sleep until Jesus comes back. You know what I mean? Like I was hoping I'd sleep for like really long time and catch up, and then it would be great. And then all of a sudden my eyes go wide awake at 7:30 in the morning as somebody is ringing my doorbell and knocking on my door. And I woke up and I'm like, what's happening? And I don't know if you've ever taken a sleep medication. This was my first time. And I woke up in like a fog. Like it was like this thing where I just felt sedated and my eyes didn't want to open. And I was like, I'm not answering that door. Whoever needs something at 7:30, they came at the wrong time. Like this is not, you know what I mean? I'm not doing that. And then the doorbell rings again. And I'm like, well, they're persistent. And then they knock. And then the doorbell rings a third time and they knock. And all of a sudden I do that thing that some of us do in those moments where you go, is this an emergency? Is something wrong? You know, does somebody need me? And so I just roll out of bed and I'm like trying to push through because my head's in like a fog. My eyes feel half glazed over and half open. My hair is disheveled. All I am wearing is a pair of short athletic shorts. I know that's TMI, but it's important. You'll see at some point here today. And so I that's all I've got. Like, and I'm just disheveled and going to the door. And I walk to the door and I open it, and standing in my entryway are 4 people, right? And there's a guy holding religious literature, a woman standing next to him holding a clipboard, and then 2 people in the back who look like they're praying. And like good on them for getting up early and doing the things, but I was not happy, right? Like I just wasn't at that. I was like, I just want to go back to bed. I have not slept and I just want to keep sleeping. Like, and I feel like I could if I tried. And so I'm immediately like, hey, what's going on? And then I open the door and they look, and immediately the guy goes, hello, sir. Have you ever heard of a place called the Garden of Eden? And I just try to pause and shut the whole thing down right then. And I go, oh, don't, guys, we're good. We're good. Like I read the Bible. Yes, I've read Genesis and I love God. Like we are good. And they cut me off and he redirects the conversation. He's like, well, there's this thing called paradise and here's how this works and all this other stuff, and starts talking to me. And I keep trying to pause the conversation. And every time I try to pause, he just redirects me. And I notice every time this guy redirects me, the lady next to him with the clipboard checks something and starts writing a note. And I'm like, what is this? Like, what are you doing? But I just wanted to stop. Remember, I look like something's wrong with me. Do you know what I mean? Like I look like I shouldn't have opened the door and should have had some thoughts first, like that type of a thing. And I just want to stop it. So I interrupt again. And finally I'm like, hey, it's okay. I don't really think I want to do this. And then they interrupt me again and keep going around and they redirect the conversation and it keeps continuing. And finally I get frustrated where I'm just like, no, like I need this to stop. So I go, I don't want to do, and then they interrupt me again and they keep going. And it just keeps happening each time, check mark in a note. And I'm like, what are you writing? What is this? Right? And then finally, I am exhausted. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make this stop. My mental faculties are not completely all there. Again, shirtless, pair of shorts. That's it. Hair everywhere like crazy, eyes half opened. I look nuts. And I just don't know what to do. So I just burst out and I go, and I just start making crazy noises. I did this, you guys. Just like that. And all of a sudden, everyone gets really quiet. And I look and the 4 people are wide-eyed and the people in the back are praying hard now. And I'm serious. And I just was so frustrated. And I said, no. And I shut the door and I went back to bed. I did. And you guys clap. That's funny. That's like the craziest thing I've done in a long time. And you guys are like, it's great. It's funny. I was not expecting that response. I remember my wife comes home at the end of the day and she says, Ryan, how was your day? And I was like, I think I did something real weird today. Like I think I did something a little bit crazy. And I told her and we laughed. And I still laugh about it once or twice a year when it pops into my head in moments that God uses it to just bring joy to my day. Here's the thing though, I share that these people wanted to make a difference in my life. You don't get up that early in the morning to do that in neighborhoods if you don't believe you have something worth sharing that you want to make a difference in. That's why they got up. That's why they did this. They showed up at my door because they wanted to make a difference in my life. They believed something that they wanted me to believe because they thought it would yield good things for my life and do something important in my life. And so they showed up at my door because they wanted to make a difference. And I think what's interesting is instead of seeing me or caring about me in that particular moment, they decided to simply tell me what I ought to know right away. Here's all the things that I want to explain to you and all the things that maybe you don't know that you need to know right now and all that stuff. And I just didn't know how to make it stop at that time. Instead of having empathy towards me or perhaps even learning my name, because we didn't do that. I can't tell you what their names are and they couldn't tell you what my name is. It just became suddenly about arguments and things that were right and things that were wrong and all of the stuff that's happening right there at 7:30 in the morning on my entryway. And I feel like it was just complicated. It felt weird to be on the other end of that particular moment. And had they seen my exhaustion, had they noticed me, and had they even said, you know what, you don't look well, because I didn't. Had they just been like, and I'd love to pray for you, I'd have been like, please, anything that closes my eyes, let's do that. Pray for a long time. Like, let's just do this. But they didn't. Instead, it just became diversions and arguments and overcoming and all of this other stuff because there's something they believed that they wanted me to know because they felt like a difference needed to be made in my life, and that's the way they wanted to make it. And I know I'm being a little critical of this. I got frustrated that day, but here's the truth. The truth is they were going about being a difference maker in the same way that I think I so often do. And in the same way that I think we so often do when we genuinely find something in our lives we really care about where we want to make a difference in somebody else's life with the very same thing. And I think that's all that was happening. Friends, can I ask, why is it that when we want to be a difference maker in someone's life because we believe we hold something good and beautiful that makes a difference and we want to make that difference, that we often do it by trying to out-argue or outmaneuver or circumvent the person in front of us and the things that they care about and think? Why do we do that? And it's not because we're bad. Like, this is very human. This isn't an exception. This is like super normal. This is just what we all kind of do at times, right? Why do we choose this? Because it doesn't work. Like, if I were to ask you, does that work in your own life when people want to make that difference for you? And you'd look and you'd be like, no. That's why you started clapping a moment ago, right? Because I made it stop. These moments, why do we do it if it doesn't work? At times, it leaves people feeling unseen or small or unheard or even just dug in and more frustrated and more vindicated and all these pieces. If we want to make a difference in people's lives, I think we should think about how we go about doing it. Because here's the truth. We're in the midst of this Difference Maker series, and 2 weeks ago, we acknowledged this idea that you're a difference maker. And the reason why is because if you have Jesus Christ in you, if you have the power of the living God in you, if you have the grace of God and the unconditional love of God filling you and flowing through you, whether you have acknowledged this about yourself or not, you are a difference maker because that makes a difference. Jesus has made a difference. And even more than that, we're also the church altogether, which by definition is a gathering of people who come together to make a bigger difference with one another than they could make themselves, which means you're a difference maker. Just by being a part of this whole thing, each of us are difference makers, but the question that I want to ask us this morning is not, are you a difference maker? Because you are. The question I want to ask you this morning is, what kind of difference maker do you want to be? When you think about this in your own life, what kind of difference maker do you want to be? And here's why I ask. There are people in your life I know you care about. and that you want good things for, and that you want to make a difference in their lives. So what kind of difference maker do you want to be? You live in a neighborhood that you care about. You live with people in a community that you care about. You have things in you that you believe are good and beautiful, and you want good things for the people around you, and you want to make a difference. What kind of difference maker do you want to be? Think about it reflectively for just a little bit. Are you going to choose to be the person with the loudest voice and the strongest argument? Because I'm going to be honest with you. That's everywhere. Lots of people are trying to make that kind of a difference. I don't know that that's actually different enough to actually make a difference if we think about it. Right? That's actually pretty normal. Or maybe we wanted to be a difference maker because we've come to believe all the right things. Like we really feel like we believe the right things, and now we're doing the right things, and you look around you and like people don't believe the right things and people are doing the wrong things. So I need to tell the people the things that they believe wrong and tell them to do the right things, and what they're doing is wrong. And I'm gonna do that because I wanna make a difference, because I care and I want that to change. And I'm gonna be honest, that's really common. That's everywhere. People all around us, but the thing I think we should acknowledge is I don't know that that's difference enough to actually make a difference in this world, in people's lives at this moment, in this time. Or maybe you're wanting to be a difference maker and you really want that, but for you, there's just this sense of like, it's awkward to make a difference. And sometimes I don't know what to do with people and things. And so I'll wait for them just to come to me. And so you're like, I'm a difference maker. And I sit back and I wait for everyone else to come to me, because if people really wanted a difference to be made, they'd seek it out. And I just think everybody does that. We're all waiting for somebody else to make that easy. That's common. I don't know that that's different enough to actually make a difference. Friends, here's what I want to articulate here today. If you want to make a difference in someone's life, then you have to show up differently than they're expecting. You have to do something different than the average norm. If you want to make a difference in someone's life, then you have to show up differently than they are expecting. And I'm not saying different than who you are. I'm not saying pretend to be somebody else. I'm just saying differently than the norm, than the status quo, than the average. And here's why. Because if all we as the church can do, and if all as we as individuals who are difference makers because Christ is within us, if all we can do is show up just like everybody else is showing up in the way and the forms that everybody else is showing up, that's just more of the same. That doesn't create difference. That's not different enough to actually make a difference. And one of the things that I love about Jesus is that he shows up so differently. When you think about Jesus, what's so fascinating about him is, man, can you imagine all the expectations that were on him of who he needed to be and how he needed to operate and how he needed to act? And every time he seems to show up into a situation, he shows up differently than the way that everybody expected him to be. He hangs out with people that everybody expected him to not hang out with. He spends time with them, enters into moments with them. And then in the moments when he's with those people, he does things that nobody else ever would have expected him to do. And people encountered him differently than they'd encountered any kind of religious system at that point in time. And it was so refreshing, it actually made a difference in their life, because Jesus is our difference maker, is he not? And so for we as the church who are his body, right? The Bible uses the illustration, we're the body and he's our head. We're all this one thing in Christ trying to do something big in this world and beautiful and make this profound kind of difference. I think we should follow in his stead. I think we should look at our difference maker and go, okay, what's he doing? What is he after? So that when I seek to be decide the kind of difference maker I want to be, it looks more and more like Jesus. And I think it's an important thing for the church to think about. I think it's an important thing for us here today to think about. And so to do that, I want to look at a moment, one singular moment in the Bible where Jesus makes a profound difference in someone's life by showing up so differently. This is a really famous story that gets taught on a lot. If you've never read your Bible much or you haven't gone to church a ton, this is commonly referred to within Christianity as the story of Jesus and the woman at the well, and it's found in John chapter 4. And if you have your Bibles, you can turn there. I'm going to begin at verse 4. If you don't, we can follow along on the screen. John 4:4, it says this, and I'll ask us some questions along the way to just help us engage this. John 4:4, it says this. He, Jesus, had to pass through Samaria. And I'm gonna stop with one short verse real quick here this morning. You know, as English speakers in the modern era, right, as modern American Protestant Christians, we would read this and we're like, okay, get to the story now. Like, I just read a thing about like, okay, he had to pass through Samaria. So now get to the story where something actually happens. But you guys gotta understand, in the first century, if you're part of the original audience who would have encountered this text for the very first time, when you read these words, it is a story unto itself. It's a full stop moment. Because nobody traveled through Samaria. That's what it would have been so shocking and so jarring about this. People didn't travel through Samaria. Even if it was the shortest distance between A and B, you went around it because you didn't want to travel through it. And here's why. There was an era in Israel's history where the Babylonian Empire was just massive and strong and way bigger than Israel. And they came in and just laid waste to Israel. They conquered them. And what the Babylonian strategy was, they're like, well, we can't just leave people here in the land because they're gonna eventually like form together and build a rebellion. So we need to take a bunch of these people and disperse them into other lands with other people so that you never have this concentrated body of people to one day rebel against us. And this was part of their strategy. And so they hauled off a bunch of the Jewish people. This is what your Bibles refer to as the exile. Book of Jeremiah forecasts this and is written about it. Lamentations talks a lot about some of this. It's in your Old Testament. This is what's referred to the exile. Is all of these Jewish people get taken in to Babylon and the surrounding areas for 70 years. But there's a group of people that were left there. A lot of them were scribes or educated people and they were there. And what do you do when your infrastructure is gone and you've been kind of just shaken to your core? You've got to rebuild some things. And so they move into this region, this lush region called Samaria with plantations and farms and things, and they rebuild. And as they rebuild, the people that were there over this 70-year period, this isn't like in a couple months, over this 70-year period, they began to marry with the Babylonians who also moved in because they were conquered, and the other people who moved in because they were conquered, and all this got shaken up. And after 70 years, when Persia finally says, you can all go back to your land, and the Jewish people return, the Jewish people who are in exile return back to their land, and they see the Samaritans, and they see that they've married and intermixed with other people that they don't like, and they call them half-breeds. Yeah. To the degree that they won't even partner in the rebuilding of city and nation and things with them. And the Samaritans become confined to Samaria. And by the time we get to the first century with Jesus, it's to the degree that people won't even travel through the land because that's where those people who live in that place are. There's racism and there's prejudice and it's pervasive. And Jesus, and we read about in John 4, what's that one verse said? And he had to pass through Samaria, full stop. You don't pass through Samaria because that's where those people in that place live. And yet what does Jesus, our difference maker, do? He goes right through the middle of it, doesn't he? He doesn't go around it. He doesn't avoid it. He walks right through the middle of it with great intention. And friends, I want to ask you this question in light of who our difference maker is, and it's this. Who are you avoiding that God might want you to love? If you want to make a difference in somebody's life by being different enough to actually make a difference, if you want to follow in the stead of our difference maker, Jesus, I want you to ask yourself this question. Who are you avoiding that God might actually want you to love? You know, several years ago, I was completing a counseling program at that same time that I was crazy on my door. And as part of the just initial step towards an associate license, you have to spend at least 240 hours of face time, actual time, direct time with clients where you're doing counseling. And so I was working in behavioral health at that time, and I had a supervisor who supervised the entire behavioral health wing. And I had, I think, about 18 clients that were meeting with me during that season of time as I was accruing hours towards licensure and doing all that stuff there. And so I would do this, and each week I'd meet with my supervisor, and they'd be like, okay, how's it going? And talk to me about how you're working with this person, because they're trying to help me be a better counselor, and they're also helping make sure I'm ethical and doing the things that I need to do. And so I'm reporting to this. I'm like sitting down in one of our meetings, and I'm sharing about some of the work I'm doing with clients and asking for advice or different moments or these things. And my supervisor pauses me and goes, Ryan, can I just pause you for a second? And her face looked bewildered. She looked a little confused. And I said, yeah, what's going on? She goes, I just don't know if you've noticed. Have you noticed that like a third of your caseload is from people who are from really like fundamentalist religious backgrounds? And I laughed and I said, yeah, I say with these people, I've noticed this. Like, yes, I have. And she goes, yeah, that's why I'm kind of confused. And I said, okay. And she goes, well, I noticed that when you talk about this, you're kind of defensive. And I also noticed that when you share about what you're doing with clients, sometimes you start arguing with your clients. Or sometimes when those moments get brought up, it's like you try to shut that down or avoid it altogether. Or you try to do this thing over here. And then she looks so confused at me and she goes, Ryan, aren't you a pastor too? And I was like, yes. Yes, I am. And I told her, I was like, that probably has something to do with it. I've had so many of these conversations that maybe I've just learned to have pat answers or be defensive or to step into it a certain way. And I was like, but can I be honest and tell you what the larger piece is? That's how I used to operate in my life. For years, I was this person that based my life off here's the rules and how do I please God and all this stuff. And I've learned this way of love and grace where I'm following Jesus and trying to put my full faith there. And it's just been so different for me. And friends, I'll share a truth about life for all of us. This is almost always true. And it's this: you'll always be most judgmental towards the place you last were in your life. Wherever the place you last were that you're like, I don't want to be there anymore, and you're now here, you'll always be most judgmental towards that one place. And I think I was blind to it. It's funny, when she pointed this out to me, my eyes just kind of opened up and I was like, she's right. I hadn't caught this, but she's right. Just being honest. And maybe this is why I'd been stalling out and so much of the work just hadn't been happening in counseling and some things hadn't been working quite right. And she looked at me and she goes, Ryan, I just wonder if maybe you could go about it and ask some different questions and be more exploratory and see what they really care about. And so I said, okay, I'm gonna do that. And I showed up to sessions after this with people. And I just said, hey, for the people in this demographic, I would just look and say, hey, so I know this is really important to you. Tell me what's most important to you. Tell me what matters most. What does your heart really care about? Why? Like, what's hardest about this? Like, help me see you clearly and help me understand what you understand, know what you know so that I can see you. And we just started to talk, and it just opened up this amazing opportunity where for the first time, it wasn't me trying to lead people to where I thought they needed to go. It was actually partnering with people because of what they were working through. And I just watched God begin to work through those moments and these things in ways that there just wasn't a lot of work happening before. And it became absolutely powerful. You know, I'm grateful for the wisdom that supervisor gave me that day. I'm grateful for it even still in my life. Friends, who do we avoid? That God might be looking to us and saying, no, I actually want you to love them. And you're either confronting them or getting around them or trying to move all this stuff, but I actually love them. You know, somewhere for me along the way, I had forgotten that the same grace and love that transformed me is there for everybody else too. Even people who are struggling with the very things that I just was a part of. And that's okay. And man, was that an important reminder. Who are we avoiding? You know, we avoid for different reasons. Sometimes it's our judgments. Sometimes it's our prejudices. Sometimes it's discomfort. Sometimes it's our history. I don't know what it might be for you. All I'm challenging you to do is wrestle with this question and pray through it. And here's what I want to challenge you. If God brings somebody to your mind, if God opens your eyes to see somebody that normally you'd avoid, instead of just walking your way around Samaria, I want you to ask yourself the question, who's the Samaritan in my life right now? Who's the Samaritan in my office place? Who's the Samaritan in my family? Who's the Samaritan in my friend circles, in my neighborhood, in my community? And ask God to give you some strength to step in and love the people that he loves already. It's a hard thing, but we're the church and we have a great difference maker who makes that difference in us too, don't we? I want to bring us to the second thing and keep going in the passage here. John chapter 4, verse 5 says, so he, Jesus, came to a town of Samaria called Sychar. And it's near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Joseph's well was there. Again, if you're new to the Bible or not super familiar, it's referencing back to an Old Testament story. And it's basically saying, man, there's this really famous moment in Israel's history where there's a famous well that's at this place, right? And it says Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well. And it was about the 6th hour. And a woman from Samaria came to draw water. You know what I love? I love that Jesus doesn't just travel through Samaria, he travels to Samaria and he stops. He stops at this town. And he goes and he sits down at a well. Imagine this story with me. He's tired, he's been journeying. The passage in parentheticals a little while later will tell us that he had sent his disciples on ahead already. So Jesus is alone, it's the middle of the day, and he goes and he sits by this well, and this woman approaches him. And I know we might look at this again as like a modern American audience, and we might see this and be like, cool, Jesus is thirsty, he goes to a well, a woman comes to the well, now they get to have a great moment, a great conversation. Like, isn't that amazing? Isn't that great? But again, if you're a first century reader, and you're hearing this for the first time, this is another one of those full stop moments. Jesus isn't supposed to be in Samaria. He's certainly not supposed to be pausing in Samaria, and he's definitely not supposed to be talking as a Jewish man to a Samaritan woman in Samaria. And he's certainly not just supposed to be hanging out waiting by a well, and he shouldn't be asking her for water, because he asked her for water and she gives it to him, he's gonna be unclean. Like, this whole thing's not great. And why are they there in the middle of the day? This is all the questions that would pop into your head. You know, at times your Bible includes some details and you might read and you're like, cool, thanks, Bible, for telling me all of this stuff I didn't need to know. Get to the story. But the reality is, when John includes this spot about it's like the middle of the day here, it's because he wants us to go, that's not normal. Pay attention. Look at this. It's not normal. Here's why. The real question we should be asking is, why was she there? Okay, Jesus is a difference maker. He's doing something different. Why is she there at the middle of the day? What's she doing? Well, in this culture at this time, you came to the well in the morning. And the women would all bring these buckets of water and they take stuff home for their day. But it's not just about waiting in line to get water. It's not like when we stand at a drinking fountain and we all just get really quiet and wait for the person in front and you hope nobody spits on it. Like that kind of a thing, right? It's everybody gathering around and they talk with one another and they share life with one another. And this is communal and collective and relational. And so this woman's not showing up in the morning to get water. She's showing up in the middle of the day because that's the time of day she knows no one will be at the well. That's the time of day you go to if you don't want anyone else to be there with you and you want to draw your water alone. And the reason why she'd want to draw her water alone, and we read this a little while later, is because she has circumstances in her life that she would be judged for in this particular culture at this particular time. The Bible tells us, as Jesus is talking with her, that she has had 5 husbands and the person that she's now with is not her own. If you're going to have 5 husbands in this particular culture, that means 5 people have died or there's scandal involved. And so she's either been the object of misfortune like crazy, or there's some kind of scandal that's involved here. And now for her to actually be with somebody who's not her husband in this particular culture, that would have been the talk of the town, you guys. It would have been crazy for all of this. And so if she goes to the well early in the morning, it's like showing up to the office cooler when everybody gets really quiet and starts whispering under their breath. It's showing up to a moment where all of a sudden you see everybody's eyes, but nobody's talking to you, and you hear everybody's whispers, and you know the passive aggressive moments are about to start, and the judgment's gonna fall on everybody and all of this. And she's already experienced enough of this in her life, I would imagine, and so she's showing up in the middle of the day because nobody's supposed to be there. But Jesus is there. Our difference maker is sitting by the well already. He doesn't come swinging in to save the day. He's there waiting for her for this moment to arrive, to have a beautiful interaction with her. Friends, in your life, who is expecting nobody else to show up that you can show up for? Who is there in your life right now that perhaps is just, in their heads, they're like, people don't show up for me because that's how life works. And you get the opportunity to be the kind of difference maker that Jesus is and show up for them. I can promise you this. I can promise you that there's someone in your life right now that believes it is absolutely normal to have no one show up for them in the moments they need it. I promise you. I can promise you that in your life right now, there is somebody who believes that in the joys they have, that it's really normal for just no one to be there to celebrate it. Or in the struggles they have, it's really normal for no one to be there to walk through those moments with it, that it is just normal for no one to show up. And it's not because they're jaded, and it's not because they're cynical, and it's not because they're bad or dumb or anything else. It's because life has dictated to them. They have lived life long enough to look around and be like, because people don't show up. Because that's normal. That's what makes Jesus so different. And if we want to be the kind of difference makers, just like our difference maker, maybe we have to do something differently enough to make that real difference. You see what I'm saying? Who is there in your life that you can show up for, where they're just not expecting you? And here's all I want you to do. I want you to walk around with your eyes open. And what you might find is that you see people suddenly in your office where you're like, I don't think anybody ever talks to them, and I think they expect nobody to ever talk with them. And you just get to be like, hey, how's your week? I see you. Maybe there's somebody in your life that just needs a meal to be dropped by at some point in time because they're going through something hard and they just needed tangible care to know that someone cares. Maybe there's someone that is going through something and they just need, they don't need your answers and your advice, they just need your presence. They just need you to sit with them and say, I just didn't want you to be alone, and I just wanted to sit and be here with you. Because that's a powerful way to be with somebody. And maybe there's somebody in your life who's going through something amazing and something joyous, and they don't have anybody looking at them being like, you realize that's amazing? Can I celebrate with you? Can I take joy with you? Because we ought to. That's beautiful. Who can you show up for that thinks no one else is going to be there? And then I want to go to the last thing here this morning. And it's continuing on at verse 7. Jesus says to her, give me a drink. And we look at that and it sounds really bossy, doesn't it? Give me a drink. I love that. But it wouldn't have been this way. This is actually a really big moment for Jesus to look at her and ask for water. Verse 8, for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Jesus is alone. They're not there. Verse 9, the Samaritan woman said to him, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he, as in me, you would have asked me, and he would have given you living water. And this is this powerful exchange. Jesus and this woman began talking with each other. And here's what I want you to notice. Okay, finally, the conversation starts, right? How does Jesus begin this conversation? I've been waiting for you to come here, and I have some things I want to tell you that are going wrong in your life that you need to change, and I want to give you some theological arguments about why you need to change them, right? No. What does he do? How does he start this conversation? I think this is profound. I never realized this until I was just studying through this recently, and I was like, man, I love how God just continues to unfold with beauty as I read through the text. How does he start? He looks and he goes, I'm thirsty, and I could use some water. Will you draw your bucket so that you can meet me? Isn't that fascinating? This is what Jesus does. And this is crazy. That's why she looks at him bewildered and goes, I don't think you know how things work, Jesus. Right? Like it's such a jarring moment. It's such a different moment where he's like, I would like you to draw some water because I could use a drink. Will you offer one to me? I would drink the water that you would provide me. And she's like, you don't understand how this works. You're not supposed to talk with me. You don't interact with me. You're not supposed to be here. And not only are you not supposed to be here because that's normal for me, but if I draw you water and I pour it for you, you're gonna be like unclean and sullied by me because of the way y'all think and operate, and you would drink my water? You guys, this is a moment where Jesus is sitting at a well, unarmored, vulnerable, and he's literally going, look, I have been traveling and I am tired and I could use some water and I would be so happy if you would just draw that for me and quench my thirst. And then he says, and also you know that I'd like to quench yours. Also, here's what I would most love for you. And what's so significant about this particular moment is it's like he's restoring her dignity. This is a woman who shows up to the well because she thinks no one's gonna be there because of judgments and things and the way this would have worked in a collectivist culture. And Jesus shows up, and not only does he go, yeah, I know, we're the Jewish people who have all of these prejudices towards you as the Samaritans, but also I see you and I wanna talk with you. And if you poured me water, I would drink it. I'd sit down with you and I would enjoy this moment with you. This is profound, you guys. Who needs your vulnerability so that they can share theirs with dignity? Here's a thing that's really normal in our society. And this is really normal in churches, but it's also normal outside of churches. It is normal for people to think, okay, we're the good people and those are the bad people, so we as the good people should go help the bad people and make a difference with the bad people because we want to do good. It is really normal to think that way. It is really normal for people to think we're the people who are blessed, so we should go help the people who aren't blessed because I want to do good. I want good things for that. Like I would like good to happen. It is really normal for us to think we are the well-off or we are the rich, and so we should go help the people who aren't well-off or who are poor because I want to do good things. I want good things to happen. And I know that sounds like altruism, but can I tell you what actually happens in that dynamic? And it's subtle, but it's so important, and I would so love for you to catch this. What ends up actually happening in that dynamic is we end up making ourselves better than the other person. We're like, we have the things and you're less than. And so let me meet you in that. And even though if you might be like, well, statistically, maybe that's true on a monetary level or on a certain, like I get how we could think about it, but what ends up happening is we rob people of their dignity and we're no longer having a face-to-face conversation, and it makes people feel small. And it actually does a little bit of hurt while trying to do a little bit of good. What I love about Jesus, he's so different. He sits down and what does he do? He opens himself up with vulnerability and he says, can I have a drink of water? Would you pour water for me? And I'd like to drink the water that you draw out. And upon doing that, he says, and I'd also like to give you something in return. And they meet each other as equals with dignity. Friends, who is it that's in your life that you've just slipped into, even if it's accidentally, of thinking maybe they're less than? And there's an opportunity for you to just raise their dignity. Don't go tell them this. Wrestle through this with God. Wrestle through this with yourself. But take this step. I think it's a big deal. Who's there in your life that perhaps you've come to see yourself as better than? And maybe it's just because they're a mess or because they're going through hard things or because of whatever these things are and you're like, and I'm not. And so, but you slip into this dynamic. How can you step into moments where you meet them with dignity? And here's the real thing, because a lot of us will be like, I don't actually know how to do that. Before you step in to make a difference in somebody else's life, are you willing to let them make a difference in yours? Are you willing to open yourself up to say, this isn't me just, here I come to save the day. This is me stepping in, and I think God can use you to change me and to love me, and I actually want to step in and I want to love you. And that, friends, creates dignity and makes a powerful kind of difference. And it's what I see in Jesus, and it's what I love about him. He's our difference maker, isn't he? He goes on, and I'm going to summarize the rest of the story where he says, I want to give you living water. Living water is like water from a freshwater spring that never ends. And what he's saying is like, not only would I drink the water that you would have to give to me, but if you even knew who you were talking to right now, I would love you to put your faith in me, that I could fill you with a kind of worth and value and life that makes you like a freshwater spring. If you would just drink from me, if you'd put your faith in me, I would love to change the fact that you actually come to the well thinking no one's gonna be there, and I wanna so fill you with love and grace that you become the outflow of that for the community around you. I would love for you to drink from me in such a way that your life flips upside down from being, I need to hide from these people, to I have something for these people, because you become an instrument of grace and the power of God flows through you regardless of where your story has been and where it continues to go. And that's this powerful moment that Jesus gets to have. And I love this because this changes her life. And if you're sitting in this room and you're like, yeah, but at one point he calls her out, because you know the story. If you read ahead, he does. He looks at her and he goes, as they're having the conversation, he says, you've had five husbands and the one you're living with isn't your own. But I want you to look at that text. I want you to look at when he says that. Does he say, and that means this? Does he say, and here is my judgment upon you? No, and you know how you know this? Because when this conversation ends, she doesn't go back into hiding. She comes out of hiding. She runs into the middle of town to find other people. And she goes, let me tell you about someone who saw everything about me and met me. And I think I met the Christ. She's not carrying shame. She's carrying freedom, you guys. That's the difference that Jesus makes when we step into these moments and love people in these powerful kinds of ways. That's who our difference maker is. And I just want to keep asking you, what kind of difference maker do you want to be? Because there's people in your life that need you. And there's people in your community that you get to make a difference with. And there's people for us as a church that we get to step in and be difference makers. And we get to follow in the footsteps of Jesus because he makes a real kind of difference because he's different enough to actually do it. And I think that's profound. You know, after my supervisor had that conversation with me, there was one particular client that I'd been meeting with, and they were from a very fundamentalist kind of like religious background. And I'd become a little argumentative at times with this, and we were fine, like we were trying to build respect and stuff, but I could tell I wasn't being very helpful, and it wasn't going great. I just knew it. And so I listened to what my supervisor told me, and I showed up to my next session, and I just said, hey, can I reset some of this conversation things? I know this is really important to you, and I think maybe I've been missing what's so important about this to you. Can you tell me? Like, what is it about this? What is it about your faith? What is it about what you do and how you've gotten here and all this stuff? Like, can you just share a little bit? Because I want to see you. I want to understand. And this person just started to share with me. And it was amazing. As they just opened up, and there's this smile, and there's this warmth, and it like changed. And then I said, I know as part of your beliefs and part of your, the way you walk out faith and religion, that you actually do door-to-door canvassing and you do all this stuff. And so I bet you that gets crazy at times and really beautiful at times because that's how home works for people. And you get to step into homes. And I wonder what that's been like. And she's like, yeah, it can be really amazing. It can be beautiful. But also, there's one time where I encountered a demon-possessed man. And I said, wow, that's crazy. Tell me about that. Yeah, some of you have already seen where this is going. And I said, yeah, that's crazy. Tell me about that. And they go, well, we got up early in the morning and we're out there and we went to this one house and there was a car in the driveway and I knew somebody was home but nobody was answering. And I just felt this nudging that like I needed to keep knocking and I needed, because whatever our message was, like this person really needed to hear it. So we rang the doorbell like 3 times and kept knocking. And finally, this guy shows up at the door and he is wearing nothing but his boxer shorts, running shorts, that's why I shared it, wearing nothing but his boxer shorts and his hair is disheveled and his eyes are glazed over and he looks like something's wrong with him. And so we just start in, and a couple of people started praying, and we started sharing with him about the Garden of Eden and about, all these pieces and things. And he keeps trying to stop us, but we trained for that. So, and I really thought God wants this for this person. And so I keep redirecting and trying to keep going on all of this stuff. And he keeps trying to stop. And then at one point, the truth finally comes out, and he just starts yelling in this crazy, weird, demonic language. And we didn't know what to do other than to pray. This is a real moment, guys, that happened in my real life. It is the craziest thing. And I'm sitting there going what are the odds? And God, you have the weirdest sense of humor. Right? And I'm trying to be interested, tell me more about that. That's interesting. And in my head, I'm just freaking out because I'm I think our counselor's the demon-possessed man. I think that's what's happening here. And I'm freaking out over all this. And I go, what area were you doing this in? And it was my neighborhood. Signed, sealed, delivered, I am yours, right? It's what this moment was. And I obviously, for a series of reasons, did not talk about that and was just okay, well, let's go back into some of the things we're working on and talking through. And we redirected. And it was one of the crazier things that I just reminds me of how crazy God can be sometimes in my life. What are the odds, right? Can I share with you what's beautiful though? Beyond just the craziness of that moment. From that moment, I stopped showing up in this person's life and in these sessions like somebody who knew where they ought to get to, and somebody who believed that I needed to change them to make a difference the way that I wanted to make a difference. And I just started showing up the way that I thought Jesus would potentially show up. And I didn't do this great all the time, right? It's not like I suddenly had this transformation, everything's great. I struggled through this, but there was just, every day I'd walk into a session or a moment and I'd just say, God, please help me to anchor in and I want to show up the way you love people. I want to be a presence the way that you're a presence. I want to be different the way that you're different. And I'd step into these moments and I started to just be there and see this person, and they felt loved. And it was profound. And I found myself with this crazy privilege of sitting in moments and opportunities where they were sharing things and stepping into moments with me where they thought nobody else would ever show up in. And I just got to sit there and say, I see you. And you're not alone. And how can you partner? What can you do? What's this look like? And I got to just be a tangible expression of the love of Jesus. And what's so amazing about this is, eventually I decided I probably should just work full-time here only because life was crazy. And so I did, and I had to say goodbye and close out a lot of moments. And as I went to close out this relationship with this particular person, they came to me and they stood up and they said, can I give you a hug? And I said, yeah. And then as they hugged me, they said, I have sat and talked with religious leaders, and I have had 3 different counselors. And yet there's something about this last season of time that has been such a difference maker in my life. And I'm so thankful for it. And I'm hugging this person, but everything in me just wants to yell in their ear, that's Jesus. Because that's all it is. We always think that we have the plan and that we know where people need to get, and that being a difference maker is, this is the difference I think ought to happen, and so y'all need to get here, and how do I pull you there? But the reality is, when you see who Jesus is and how he shows up, he meets people in the midst of their dignity. He shows up in places nobody else is showing up to. He doesn't avoid, he goes right through. He meets people right where they are, and he loves them in the most profound of ways, and it opens people up and makes a difference as they continue on in this journey in their life. And friends, I ask you again, what kind of difference maker do you want to be? Because here's my prayer for you and for me, that our eyes would be so unapologetically fixed on Jesus that we just keep following in his direction, loving like he loves, showing up like he shows up, and trusting God with all the complexity that comes with it, because that makes a difference. Let's pray. God, we come before you, and I thank you for your sense of humor sometimes. I do. Lord, I thank you for this group of people. And I just pray, Lord, that you give us wisdom. Open our eyes to the people in our lives that perhaps you just want us to love right where they are, as they are. Give us the kind of honesty and vulnerability and courage to see the places we avoid that you want us to walk through. Give us the heart and the compassion to see people right where they are and be with them in the moments they most need. Give us the humility, Father, to have just vulnerability to let other people make a difference in our life in the same way that perhaps we'd love to show up in theirs. And God, use your church, use us, use each of us as individuals, use all of us together to continue to make a difference by loving people the way that you do. It is big and crazy to carry that care, but we trust you with it because you're big enough to handle it. We trust the whole world to you. We love you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Friends, before you go, it is awesome to have you guys here. If you're new with us, I'm gonna be right over here in this little area called the Welcome Party, which is just illuminated. And we'd just love to shake your hand and say hey. And if you have any questions for Miles or for Ryan, who talked earlier as one of our council members, they'll be right over here in this meetup in the West area. But good to see you guys. We'll see you soon.